can't build an incredible brand by having some slow, clunky agency producing your content for you and doing all your marketing for you. I don't get any satisfaction in that, right? But yes, disrupt or be disrupted. Lead or be forced to follow.
You are listening to Lead with Trust, brought to you by The Trust Leader. Lead with Trust is the podcast that teaches you how to build trust systematically and intentionally, making every part of the business easier, from sales and marketing to employee and customer retention. If you are tired of doing everything right, yet growth still feels like an uphill battle, this show is for you. In this season, we will explore the first stage of the Trust Leader framework, building transactional trust. By communicating your competence, reliability, and integrity effectively, so your buyers and customers will see you as the obvious, trustworthy choice. In future seasons, we will go deeper into how to turn that initial trust into long-term loyalty and lasting resilience. Want to learn more about how to build trust in business? Pick up my new book, Lead with Trust, available everywhere books are sold. Now, let's get on with the show. Welcome to another episode of Trust Builders. Today, I have with me the amazing Marcus Sheridan. Marcus, here's a little secret for you. I set up this podcast and my first guest on the list was you, but I felt like I can't have you on as the first guest because I need to get a couple of episodes under my belt and practice before I have you. But I am super thrilled that you take the time out of your busy schedule, because you're in the middle of a book launch, to come and talk to me.
Happy to be here. Yeah, and I think what you're doing is great. I love the name Trust Builders. I think that's like the perfect name. So this is going to be a wonderful conversation. And the cool thing about trust, as your audience well knows, is it doesn't ever go away in terms of it being needed as a business, right? Or just as a person. Like, this is going to be a fundamental need that we have as businesses forever. And so it's an evergreen subject, and it's very worthy of talking about right now, especially with such a trust deficit in the market. So yeah, let's do it.
Excellent, because we're going to get exactly to the core of that. You set us up perfectly for this conversation. So before we get there, though, I want to just go back 10 years. It's been almost 10 years that you've published They Ask You Answer. You've taken your swimming pool company from the brink of bankruptcy to becoming one of the most visited pool websites in the world by doing exactly that. Now, what is for those who are unfamiliar with They Ask You Answer, what is it, just in 60 seconds?
Yeah, it's really just an obsession with how your buyers are thinking and acting, and the willingness to meet them where they are, to give them what they want, especially when it comes to their questions, worries, fears, issues, concerns, being willing to address those online. And, most companies say they're transparent. They say they care about the buyer. But the truth is, most don't give them what they want, especially online, especially when it comes to addressing their questions, worries, fears, issues, concerns about that product or service that they sell. So They Ask You Answer is the antithesis of that. And it's the ultimate when it comes to trust and transparency online.
I've actually implemented the principles of They Ask You Answer for about 10 years, maybe even before the book came out, because I came to a workshop in end of 2015, and you were talking about those principles already. And in the last 10 years, I've really seen that those companies who embrace it wholeheartedly do way better than companies who do just inbound marketing, who just do content marketing.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I mean, really, you think about it, it's they ask, you answer, they being the customer, the buyer, ask being every single thing that they want or prefer. So in other words, some people want to see a video, right? And so are you going to meet them where they are and show a video of that particular thing? Or are you just going to say as a company, hey, video's not our thing? That doesn't work today. I mean, you can't do that. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a business owner, if you're a marketer, you signed up to meet the buyer where they are. That's what leads to success. You can't drive these square pegs and round holes anymore and think that you're going to build an incredibly viable brand. You can't, be so resistant in the market and say, I'm not going to give them what they want, because somebody's going to give them what they want, at least in terms of, information. It takes companies, though, a little bit of time to start thinking more like their buyers, though, and to and I don't exactly know why this is, Hannah, because I was like, for me, this is always pretty natural. I can look in the mirror and say, okay, well, I would like it like this, so my buyers would too. For some reason, especially marketers, they overcomplicate this, and they just overcomplicate marketing in general. And I think if you understand how the golden rule works, and you really approach it from a, what would I want in this moment? What would I want to read? What would I want to watch? How would I want to feel? Like, if you can really just become self-aware of that, I'm telling you what, you're going to do so many wonderful things with your marketing, with your content, that others in your space just simply are not doing. And the other side to this is, you can't, like, generally what we see over and over again is, you can't outsource your voice and think that you're going to become that voice of trust online. You just can't do it. And is fascinating, because in 2021, roughly 30% of all companies were planning on leaving their marketing agency within 6 months. In 2022, that number had gone to 38%. 2023, that number had gone to 55%. And so why are we just like jumping ship with agencies today? There's a bunch of reasons, but for the most part, it's, you can't outsource your way to incredible success online. You can't build an incredible brand by having some slow, clunky agency producing your content for you and doing all your marketing for you. Unless you learn to have some of these capabilities yourself, whether you're an army of one or an army of many, right? So if you're listening to this right now and you're only a one-person shop, don't sit there and say, well, woe is me. I mean, hey, you have unlimited potential, because you have zero people holding you accountable. You have zero approvals that you have to go through. There's no red tape in your company, right? And so there's a reason why these smaller companies can be so much more creative. They can be so much more disruptive. They can break the rules of their industry, and they just don't have to ask permission to do it. So if you're not a big team, don't feel sorry for yourself. Feel excited about that, but just know that it's gonna come with the learning curve. You got to, you're gonna have to figure these things out, and it's just like anything else. You got to crawl before you walk. You got to walk before you run. But eventually, you can become an incredible in-house agency, if you will. Like, you have this capability within you, regardless of the size of your company, and you can become a creator, and you can tell your story better than anyone else. And this is the story that you got to tell yourself. Otherwise, you're probably not going to stand out very much at all.
But it's not necessarily a question of skill set, but more a question of mindset. Yeah, you need to like be good enough, but it doesn't need to be perfect. What needs to be really on target is that mindset of trying to do genuinely the right thing.
Yeah, I think it's I think a lot of people do get held up with the, I don't have these particular skills. I don't have these, particular, capabilities, when all you really have to do is, like, I remember, let me just give you an example. When I just started doing video aggressively with my pool company, me and my business partner, Jason, we'd walk up on a job site, and we'd look around and we'd say, what is every question we would have right now if we were just a homeowner just walking up on this site? So we'd look at the fence that was around the pool. We'd say, okay, well, I'd want to know, why'd they choose this fence? Why'd they put this fence right here? Why'd they go with this particular material? Why'd they choose that patio? Why did they choose the design of the patio around the pool? And why did they go stone instead of concrete, right? It's just like, Why'd they put their filter system over there? Now, each one of those questions is a video. And, it's amazing about YouTube and about social. It's like when it's overproduced, it loses a lot of its luster and it loses a lot of its authenticity. And so imperfection is actually a really good thing. It's a great thing. And I think people sometimes think that their brand is supposed to like be BMW or something. It's not. You can't be, besides that, like I said, you can't be that slow. You've got to be faster today. You got to be nimble. You got to be lean. And if you do that, that means you're going to be imperfect, but you're also going to hit a bunch of home runs. You're going to do some pretty cool things. And so the mindset, to your point though, Hannah, is listen, I'm a media company. I'm a creator. There's a story in everything I do. I just got to tell that story. I got to show it. And if I do that, my tribe's going to come. They're going to show up.
Because you're authentic and because people also want to buy from people. So I want to put that aside for a minute. People buy from people, because I want to come back to that. But before we go there, I often wonder. There is you've had this crazy success story, and you've touched with the book itself, I think over 100,000 people
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
100,000 businesses.
Yeah.
Now, we've had this incredible phase of content is king, and and I'm often wondering, could you do the same success story that you had back then now, and why?
Yeah. Well, if you look at, like, I started They Ask You Answer in 2009 with River Pools, and I was able to just focus on putting great content that nobody had ever seen before about pools on my website. And that's how we became the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world. I don't think that would work today. At least I could do that and it would do well, but it wouldn't do as well in terms of world domination. Today, you've got to be more, for lack of a better phrase, the phrase that you see in the marketing world, they call it omni-channel. It means you want to be as many places as possible, because the problem is you've got a group of buyers potentially on TikTok, and then you've got some on YouTube, and you've got some on Instagram and Facebook. You might have some on LinkedIn, and so you really want to go where your potential customers are. Now, this makes it more challenging because it is harder to be great on a multiplicity of platforms than it is on just on one. And I do still recommend that you become great with something on a single platform, and then you start to work your way out. I do think that's still key. But, like, let me give you an example. So if I was gonna start They Ask You Answer today with, let's say, river pools, I might take 3 months and just really master producing great articles on my site and just really get into a rhythm like that. Once I had the rhythm, I'm like, okay, time to add video. I'm going to start to add video into the mix, and then you start to really push with, start to grow with YouTube, and you do that for another 3 months. You start to just get some rhythm there, and then you say, okay, now it's time to maybe introduce shorts into the game, YouTube Shorts. You do that for a couple months. Now you've got 3 things that you're doing, and then you're like, all right, I can really start to integrate social media into the mix. Let me, first focus on Facebook and Instagram. You do that first. And then it's like, okay, how about now we really start to pay attention to TikTok, right? So it's like the idea is that it's still a step-by-step approach, because you're not going to do all of these platforms at one time out the gate and experience the massive success you want in most cases. So you want to have a foundation of content. So I would start with your own website, and then I would start with your YouTube channel, and then I would work my way out from there. But yeah, I don't. The other part is, let me say too, it's SEO is getting harder. You can't just build your house on Google anymore, right? So that's a big part of this. AI is changing everything in terms of the way people are found. The future of search is being recommended by AI, right? And If you're not going to be building your house just on Google search alone, that means you've got to be strong in these other channels. And that's why you've got to build this like known and trusted brand across the board. Now, that's really the reason why I wrote the third version of the Ask You Answer right there, which is called Endless Customers, is because AI was changing so much of this, and you've got so much zero click going on where people are not now clicking to a website, they're getting their answer right there in Google alone. Even if you rank number one in Google, sometimes that might mean that you're 3/4 of the way down the page. I mean, it doesn't feel like you're even, sometimes it doesn't even feel like you're on the first page of Google. And you're ranked number one in search results, which is nuts. But that's where we are. It doesn't really help to complain about it. So Google's always had the same goals. Like, I want to give the best, most specific, relevant answer to my customer as quickly as possible. Well, if you look at Google's AI answers, that's generally the best, most specific, relevant answer as quickly as possible. So of course they're going to make that change. Nobody should just like moan and groan about it. That's our reality. And as a user, you prefer it. And I always say, if you prefer it, you can't complain. If then that's your customer too. I mean, that's just the way that it is. So there's a lot happening, Hannah, which is why marketing is getting harder, and you got to make change faster. Which goes back to what we said earlier, that you need to be your own in-house creator, your own in-house agency. It's a higher call for that than there's ever been.
It's funny because that would have been my next question. So much has changed. And every CEO that I talk to is constantly freaking out, right? None of the things that they've previously done are working. Like the playbooks that we relied on for the last 10 years, the content marketing that used to bring us leads in, everyone feels like they're swimming in an ocean and they have no idea where to turn to, where the lifeboat is nearest, etc. And they're just scared, right? But on the flip side of this, or maybe it's a consequence of that, and I had to laugh the other day when you put that video up in your snowy backyard and you said the definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
And people are just marketing like it's 2020.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a fact because we don't know what else to do, but we do have a playbook, right? We do have a trusted path that we can go, and that would be endless customers.
Yeah, that's the purpose of the book, right? Is to give a clear path to success online, at least over the next 5 to 10 years. I don't really think it's quite possible to write a marketing book today that is going to be perfectly relevant in 25 years. I think They Ask You Answer is always going to be relevant because its fundamental core is trust, transparency, obsess over your buyer. But even still, there's components to They Ask You Answer the book that are now more outdated, right, than they were certainly 5 years ago. And so that's why Endless Customers was necessary to write. And I want it to be as evergreen as possible. But you just can't write a truly, truly evergreen marketing book today if you're going to be at all tactical. And I have to, like, me, Hannah, like, I've got to be somewhat tactical. But what I know is there's very specific trends that I've been calling out for a while that we've got to get better at, like video being one of the biggest ones. I mean, you've got to be great with video. You've got to get comfortable with video. You got to get over yourself when it comes to video. It's like we have just got to lean into it. And I have been screaming that from the mountaintops, Hannah, as you know, for over a decade. I was saying 7-8 years ago that in the future, most folks were going to have an in-house videographer. And a lot of people were like, that's crazy. Well, now it's true. And everybody realizes that it was dead on the money. It's just where we're going. And now with AI, it's like you got, like you said, you got these folks scrambling. You're saying, oh, geez, it's not working like it used to. Well, I always ask that person, how much video are you actually doing right now? Or are you still just writing some articles that's trying to fit a particular phrase that you're trying to rank for on the first page of Google, and maybe you rank for it, but hey, you're 3/4 of the way down and they've buried you because there's some stupid Reddit that shows up above you, and and there's an AI answer, and then there's 3 YouTube results. Like, you know what I'm saying? That's the world that we live in, Hannah.
Want to know where your organization stands on the trust maturity curve? Take the Trust Leader Assessment, a 10-minute deep dive diagnostic that will help you understand where your current trust level is and what you need to do next to mature. You'll get a personalized report and practical steps. Start your assessment today. The link is in the show notes. Yep. So, speaking of the world that we live in, one of my biggest frustrations, and exactly to that point, is why are people not getting it? Right? When I talk to CEOs, and I've been trying to get this point across for the last like 10 years, that trust is like the thing that really like is almost like a north star that you can orient everything you do by. When you initially, until it makes click, why are people not doing this on purpose? Why is that always like a person by person relationship or an afterthought or a byproduct of what we do? And when a CEO wants to grow their business, they really only focus on marketing campaigns, hiring more sales managers. But why are we not starting with trust first? What's that disconnect?
Well, I think one quote that I've really grown to appreciate that is specific to AI, but it very much applies to what you just asked, which is you can't fit the future in the containers of the past. And oftentimes as we look ahead, we're basing our predictions on what's happened before.
Mm.
You can't do that today. It's completely different. You can't sit there and say, well, you know, Google lasted 20 years before it started losing its steam. So, you know, this next thing I'm sure is going to be just like that. And it's like, no, it's already moving way faster than that. And what are the containers of the past for marketing? The container of the past for marketing is I could throw money at a problem. I could buy a certain percentage of leads, and usually that could get me through. And people have been doing that for 25 years.
Mm.
25 years. And so they're still thinking like that. There's two types of organizations in terms of the way they market, Hannah. The first one is the one that goes to the grocery store and buys their food, and their refrigerator is stocked only as good as their last shopping trip, which
Mhm.
means they're only as good as the money they have in their wallet. Run out of money, you run out of food, you're in trouble. The second type is the one that thinks like the farmer. They grow their own food. They don't have to go to the grocery store. The issue, though, that it takes them longer to get their food. But once they have it, they've always got food in the refrigerator. And how much money they have in their wallet is much less important at that point. Yet, there's a reason why most people would never become a farmer, because they're not willing to pay the price. That price is what's known as the law of the harvest. It's extraordinary. It's a principle of truth. It's been around since the beginning of time. And law of the harvest basically means we reap what we sow. So if you have decided that your only means of generating leads is going to the grocery store and buying them, well, then that guarantees that there's going to be times in your life when you're very hungry and you're going to be slow to adapt, especially when that grocery store closes down and you're like, wait a sec. Well, I've been going to this grocery store for how long? Now I can't even go there? Yeah, they closed down. Guess what didn't close down? Field in the back of your house. the garden, right? That didn't close. Now you got to protect your garden. You got to nourish the crop. But this is how you can sustain difficult times is when you are self-reliant. So much of the future of successful business is one's ability to be self-reliant, to be able to create their own content,
Mhm.
i.e., plant their own crops, nourish them, protect them, harvest them. That's the future. Most won't do it because it requires more time. And so they'll just opt to continue to do the latest or greatest thing, Hannah. But this whole idea of trust is the ultimate example of the law of the harvest because it requires so much nourishing, so much work. But once you become that voice of trust, man, generally you don't go hungry.
It's a beautiful comparison, and I have to smile because I'm a homesteader and farmer myself. Love it. I mean, this is like
You totally get it.
I totally get it, preaching to the choir here. But the other thing, or the other reason why I'm like smiling, is I was just fortunate enough to interview Joel Salatin. I mean, America's Farmer, right? You know him, you're familiar with him
Hmm.
probably. For my book as a case study for benevolence.
Wow.
Benevolence is one of the criteria of the trust builder model that writing a book about. But his farm, Polyphase Farms, and we're not really talking about farming, I get that, but it's a great example. Um, he just asked a question to his employees saying, should we raise the egg prices? Because they've always been more expensive because the quality of their eggs is, above the
Yeah.
supermarket standard. And with so many chickens in the US being killed because of this bird flu thing, their prices for eggs are actually much lower than the supermarket prices right now
Hmm.
because they were farming. They built that resilience, that self reliance that you're
Yep.
talking about. So translating that into business, I think that's the core of what we're getting at, right? It's the that mindset of as long as I do the right thing, as long as I have my customers always front of mind and I do what's best for them, it takes longer. I need to nourish that. But
Hmm.
ultimately, that's where the money is.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. And that's how you build a sustainable brand, regardless of market conditions, regardless of
Yeah.
platforms that come and go, regardless of whether or not Google search is helping you or not. That's that's how we have to start thinking. This is going to filter out a lot of companies, though, Hannah. I mean, it is a lot of businesses aren't going to make it because marketing is getting harder.
So I want to kick that up a notch though, because it's not just about surviving at the moment. And I know you're very passionate about this topic as well. Right now, we're in such a big time of flux. Everything is in chaos. People don't know where uh, their next marketing strategy comes from. But this is a time for infinite creativity and innovation to push us, if we're doing the right thing, to actually come out on top, right? And I'm not just talking about we got more leads than our competitor, but I'm talking about that idea of if I can build enough trust, meaning I show my customers I am having their best interest at heart. I am fully aligning with their needs. I start to advocate for them in my market, and now I start to act on my advocacy and actually do things because that gives me kind of a permission to not care about what the rest of the market says, right? That sort of mindset of as long as I do the right thing, it's almost like standing up to a bully. As long as I do the right thing, I can do whatever I want.
Well, that's what's so cool about the internet is you can make your own rules. I've I talk about this a ton in Endless Customers, like the sheer need. I mean, it's the imperative that is disruption and not doing things like everyone else. And speaking of things that businesses notoriously are slow to do, it's very, very slow to do something that's not been done in their space. And I would argue that at this point, if your gut's telling you, "Yeah, maybe we should do this," and you're like, "Yep, nobody's ever done that before," like run in that direction. That's what you should be doing. It's like no one's ever made a video about this. Okay, that's the one I'm looking to do, not the one that has been done 15 different ways. No, I'm looking for the one that no one has ever done before, right? And so, the rule breakers they are the most essential elements to every industry because they are the ones that create innovation. Someone breaks the rules and the market responds and says, "Hey, I like that new rule." So now that new rule becomes the norm. So the rule breaker becomes the rule maker. And then the previous leader who didn't want to break any rules because they were fat and happy, they now are forced to become the rule follower. And that's the circle of life. And so the great ones keep breaking the rules, even their own rules. Like if they made the rules, they're looking to break their like own rules. But there's a reason why companies like Kodak go out of business because they say, "Oh, well, we're making too much with our film, so we don't want to do digital." And even though they literally were the ones that invented digital film, like Kodak was, which is extraordinary. Yet at the same time, they lost their business because they wouldn't adapt their own or adopt their own technology and into the world because they don't want to replace this major revenue stream. And so that's the same thing. Like if you're looking at Google, the reason why Google was slow with AI, and they might say they were slow because they were trying to be responsible. That's BS. They were they were slow because they have not figured out the perfect way how to not cannibalize their search revenue, which is in the hundreds of billions per year, right? And so it wasn't until OpenAI comes out and just shakes them that they suddenly say, "Oh, we gotta make something happen here," right? So they were in reactive mode for the first time in 20ish years. Google was in reactive mode, but it stemmed from them trying to protect a previous business model that one of these days will be obsolete.
So disruption, I think we can agree, is like super important, and it's going to be a factor that is going to separate the cream from the crop here. But if someone is listening to this and they say to themselves, I know there's things in my industry that aren't really as good as they could be,
Mm-hmm.
or there's some outdated practices that we're
Mm-hmm.
doing that I know aren't serving my customers very well, but I'm scared. It's all good that someone is the rule breaker and someone is going to be the rule maker at some point, but that doesn't sound like me. What would your advice be to sort of start tackling this? Is there a step-by-step approach?
Not really, Hannah. I don't have a lot of advice for that person. Here's the truth. Um, that person has to ask themselves, am I going to set the tone here? Or am I going to accept that I'm going to be left behind? I believe that most of every decision in life comes down to one of two choices. And it's like you will become very replaceable, very redundant if you're not willing to disrupt your industry. And to your point, like there's different ways that you can disrupt your industry. The easiest way to do it is to look at your industry like as a whole, holistically, and to say, what is it about my industry that I just don't believe is correct? Like what's wrong? What are people doing that's wrong that I want to change that just should be different? Most industries have that. And you've heard me share the example before. I talk about this in the book actually, how fiberglass pools, they used to be built on sand. Like you dig a hole in the ground, you throw a bunch of sand at the bottom of the hole, and then you throw the pool on top of that. That's stupid. You shouldn't build pools on sand. You shouldn't build houses on sand. We've known that for thousands of years. So you certainly shouldn't build a pool on sand. This is what was happening. And so we really just talked a lot about this, did videos and articles online about it. We really changed the whole industry, and we led that charge. And that really helped our brand grow and become that trusted voice. And it just made a very big difference overall for us in the market. Now, was that risky? I just think it's way more risky, Hannah, following everybody else's rules and being left behind. To me, that's risky.
Mhm.
So it's like any choice you make has risk. Which has more risk? Well, to me, being stagnant is way riskier. Doing it like it's always been done, way riskier. Following the conditions that have been provided by the market leader, like way riskier. And I just don't feel good about that. Another one, a perfect example, easy way to disrupt. You just say like, what what are we doing as a company that we could create IP around that could become like a standard? And it's like if you look at They Ask You Answer, if you look at the book They Ask You Answer, there have been plenty of books on content marketing. Why did They Ask You Answer do so much better than pretty much all of them on content marketing? Well, because I had more frameworks, the IP was more clear. So for example, we talk about the big five
Mhm.
subjects that all buyers want to know that you should be discussing online. Such a simple framework, right? Well, nobody had done that with content marketing. And so once I come out and I say, okay, there's these five subjects, they rule the world of search. You need to talk about them. Here's how you talk about them. Now all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, this whole content marketing thing to me now makes so much more sense. Believe it or not, any business can do that. Any business, and this is something that I see as a major marketing mistake just generally. Companies are constantly doing stuff and they just do it, but they don't talk about it. They don't market it. They don't drive the stake in the ground and say, hey, this is our thing. This is how we roll, right? I was with a bathroom remodeling company a couple weeks ago, Hannah. And what they do is they take out your old bathtub and they put in stand-up showers.
Mhm.
They do it pretty fast, and they've got a big business, almost $200 million. I said we should create a standard, and I said, well, what's one of the biggest like problems that you see with these stand-up showers, just in the industry as a whole? Like, well, one of the problems is that they get water behind them. I said, oh, do y'all have that problem? Like, well, no, because we have 100% acrylic surfaces. I said, so there's a difference between shower surfaces. They were like, oh, yes, absolutely. And so that means that moisture can't get behind yours, which will cause mold and mildew, which everybody is like deathly afraid of mold in their home. And they're like, yeah, that's right. I'm like, how well have you all marketed that? And they're like, we have it. I said, my gosh. I said, is there a standard that exists in the industry of water penetration prevention when it comes to surfaces? They said, there's not a standard. I said, could we make the standard? They said, yes, of course. I said, great. We're going to make the standard. We're going to talk about it from every rooftop. That's going to become our thing. And we're going to scare people to death so that they never just get an all tile shower again. Because, oh, by the way, that all tile shower you have eventually behind it, that subsurface is going to be molded, mildewed, and it's going to have to be replaced.
No, what I'm hearing is it's do or die. So disrupt now. Market conditions are changing much, much faster than they have ever changed. And if we are not changing and breaking the rules, making the new rules, and adapting quickly, we're going to be left behind. And following the crowd is a recipe to basically be left behind.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to just scare people for the sake of scaring them. I don't get any satisfaction in that, right? But yes, disrupt or be disrupted, lead or be forced to follow. As the this rate of change is going to be so extraordinary in the coming years. You're going to say, I just never expected this. So you have to be a part of that change. Otherwise, you're just going to be constantly in this place of reactivity versus proactivity, and being the one that's the trendsetter.
Awesome. All right. I would love to finish us off with a question A that I ask all the time, every one of my guests, and that is, what is a book that you've read in the last 6 months that has changed your life?
What is a book that I have read in the last 6 months?
It's probably an unfair question because you've been finishing your book.
Man, I know I should probably have like this great answer to this. I'm going to answer this the best I can. Uh, I wouldn't say it's a book; it's a podcast. In the podcast, to me, it's like reading a bunch of mini books. It's called the Founders Podcast, and basically, this guy just hyper analyzes the greatest founders of all time. I'm starting to realize that I think your best business books are just reading biographies of the greatest business minds. That to me, that to me is you just seem I just there's just so much incredible inspiration that you get from that, because that person, there's two ways to read a book, Hannah. You can read a book just to get through it, or you can read a book so it gets through you. And when you read a biography on someone, there's a chance that part of them stays inside of you, which I think is really, really cool. So I'd highly recommend the Founders Podcast.
That's a very cool suggestion. I'm going to check that out. I've heard of it, but I actually haven't listened to it. So definitely check that out. Well, thank you so much, Marcus. If someone wants to reach out, what is the best way to reach out to you? LinkedIn, email?
LinkedIn is a really good place to find me. I put some of my best stuff there. You can message me on LinkedIn. Most cases, I'm going to be able to respond, within about 48 hours. So that's a good place. You simplest email to get me is marcus@marcussheridan.com. If you're listening to this, you ever need a speaker at your event, you can find me at marcussheridan.com as well.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Want ongoing support as you put these ideas into practice? Join the Trust Leader community, a free space for business leaders who believe that transparency and trust are real competitive advantages. Get access to resources, monthly challenges, and live workshops. Find the link in the show notes and join us today.